Welcome to this video of the Canon HJ21x7.5 Cinema lens. If you'd like to skip over the physical features and specs of this lens and go straight to the test footage, there's timestamps in the description as well as chapter markers embedded in the video. So being a B4 Cinema lens, this lens has a few different things compared to what you'd expect on a typical broadcast lens. For starters, the lens has 0.8 pitch gears on the focus iris and zoom rings instead of the typical broadcast 0.5 to 0.3 pitch gears. So that means this lens can natively be used with cinema fizz systems, that's focus iris zoom controls, whether that be manual controls or wireless ones. So it works with any fizz system that uses 0.8 pitch gears, like on most standard cinema systems. This lens also has an extremely long focus throw, typical of cinema lenses. I'm not sure if the EFP or broadcast version of this lens has an equally long focus throw, or if they changed it to be more of a broadcast focus throw. But this lens also comes in what's called an EFP version, which looks and acts more like a typical broadcast lens, has a servo grip with a servo zoom motor inside, and has more of those broadcast gears on the focus iris zoom ring, and also has a doubler for the EFP version. I'll try and find an image I can use of the EFP version to show you on screen so you can see the difference. The lens is extremely long focus throw. It makes it really nice to be pulling your own focus and really finely controlling where you're focusing the lens. Particularly compared to broadcast lenses, this lens has a much longer focus throw at the end of the zoom range towards infinity, which gives you a lot more control to finesse that focus in the more telephoto shots. With the long cinema focus throw, it can be a little bit tricky in certain situations to pull focus from something close to infinity to near minimum focus in one rotation. But I find for most shooting situations that the focus throw is completely manageable for a single operator. And you can see this lens has my favorite macro switch on the back there, the push in and twist with the little thumb lever underneath the lens, so you can accurately finesse the macro ring with your index finger and thumb. Reading through the marketing material for this lens when I went to buy it a while ago, it was specifically designed for low amounts of focus breathing, as well as low amounts of chromatic aberration and well-controlled aberration. You can see that in the test footage compared to a J series lens. This lens has very well controlled chromatic aberration. Here we'll have a look at the zoom lens elements traveling to the front element. This lens has an enormous front lens element, and I have a very large clear filter that I put in the matte box of the lens that I use to protect this front element, because it costs a lot to repair, if that's even possible these days with the age of the lens. It's important to protect the front element of this lens because the macro switch on the lens allows you to focus as close as the front element and actually within the front element, so you can get a bit too close to the subject that you're trying to focus on and potentially scratch the lens. So always protecting the front lens element of this lens is very important. You don't want to be focusing on what you're shooting in the macro switch range and accidentally get too close to the subject and scratch it across the front lens element. My only complaint with the focus of this lens is being a metric user myself, that this, as far as I can tell, this lens only comes in imperial markings with inches and feet. As far as I can tell, there's no metric version of this lens, and they don't have a dual scale on the lens with both metric and imperial. But 99% of the time, that's not a problem. I'm not looking at the focus markings, so it's not really a problem. But it would have been nice to have a dual scale, as is typical of most cinema lenses. but at least they've put the focus markings on a flared section of the lens, making it easy to see for the operator. They're also in this really nice fluorescent green paint, which makes it really easy to see the markings on the lens. So yeah, this lens is really nice to use. It's a bit different to use than a typical broadcast lens, having that very long focus throw, but has that incredible image quality and a really nice, convenient 21 by zoom range. It obviously doesn't have a doubler like a broadcast lens might, but the EFP version has that. If you're looking for a lens that has that servo grip and doubler for maybe Super 35 coverage, the EFP version does have that, although it is far more expensive than this version. With this lens's 21 by zoom range, it covers you for most of your standard shooting in a standard zoom range, as well as an extreme telephoto range. So it's a very versatile lens to have in a kit. That ends our look at the physical design and specs of the Canon 21 by 7.5 Cinema lens. We're going to go into the test footage now. So pause here if you'd like to see the settings they used to capture this first lot of test footage. As you can see from that quick zoom in at the start, it's got quite a large zoom ratio, this lens, and this is T2.8 I believe, and it's very sharp straight from T2.8 being a HD lens. Very little chromatic aberration, even though it is a high contrast situation, and it still resolves nice detail in overcast without having too much chromatic aberration. Much less chromatic aberration than the SD lenses, and you can shoot at wider iris values and get cleaner images without chromatic aberration with this lens. It also has much better contrast than SD lenses when shooting high contrast areas. Particularly here you can see all that high contrast leaves behind the birds and the lack of chromatic aberrations. You can see just how little chromatic aberrations there are compared to the SD lenses in the other tests. It's very easy to get a great image with this lens. Obviously you can't get as close because you don't have the doubler with this lens, so it has Super 16 coverage only without the doubler, unless you're using an expanding adapter, so that's something to keep in mind. You also lack the servo zoom, so you don't have the electronic smooth servo zoom, and you also don't have the extra reach of the doubler. But what it lacks in those two features, it definitely makes up for in image quality, and it can handle challenging lighting situations very well. and when needed the zoom ring is quite well damped, so you can do a smooth zoom by hand as well. Here's a comparison of wide open fully zoomed in at t2.8 and then t4 and t8. You can see they all have excellent sharpness. It's just the depth of field. You're getting more of the flower in focus the more you stop down, and you're getting a bit more detail in the background if that's what you want. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you've got to be careful to protect the front lens element of this lens. So you can see you got to be careful not to run the front element of the lens into things you're trying to focus on. And using the macro switch, we can actually focus within the front element or as close to the front element. Here I have a very large clear filter protecting the front element. Some nice backlit golden hour footage on the cusp of blue hour. Although this lens has great sharpness when shot wide open, it does lose a little bit of contrast wide open. Stopping down to t2.8 can really bring that contrast back, and it also removes the ramp. That is a t2.1 to t2.9 ramp that just changes to the t2.8 at the very end of the zoom range. Shooting this lens at t2.8 just makes it a constant exposure the whole way through the zoom range, and you also get that little bit of contrast back and a bonus of even more sharpness. But you can definitely shoot this lens wide open and get some excellent results. A lot of these shots are shot wide open, and you can see fantastic detail, nice creamy bokeh. You just have to keep in mind that in post you'll have to add some contrast back in to counteract that little bit lower contrast when shot wide open. Here we have some nice macro shooting. I found a ladybug and getting some different angles of it. Here's a zoomed in shot using the macro switch as well. Can give some different results, more of a telephoto macro look. So you can get a lot of different types of shots from that really close macro shooting to earlier in the video where I showed you the extreme far telephoto shots of the birds and the flowers at more of a short and mid distance. So it's a very versatile lens. The next bit of test footage is from the previous test of this lens. So if you'd like to see more testing of this lens, more test footage at different iris values, I'll leave a card up in the corner of the video for you to watch that extra video. But otherwise, I'll just leave you to watch the rest of the footage.
Thanks for watching. This lens has been particularly nice to use as part of my kit. If you've got any questions, post them down below. Otherwise, I'll leave some cards up here for some extra videos you might want to watch. Alright, see you on the next video.